Welcome back, everybody, for another episode of Dropkicks and Joysticks. I am your host, Bloody Bill Vox. It's an exciting time. It's an exciting time indeed as I sit down and record this episode. Jade Cargill just jumped over to WWE, and even the night before I record this episode, they started airing vignettes for Brian Pillman Jr. in NXT. As I record this episode, it's the Wednesday before the Monday premiere. AEW TV is tonight, but I don't have live TV, so I won't be watching. I'll just be catching the notes. But anyway, as I record last night, we were talking about Jade Cargill's signing to WWE. One of the viewers over on Twitch mentioned how WWE has signed away 3 names, and they said Cody, Jade, and Brian Pillman Jr. And I said, well, that one's not really confirmed yet. Like, yeah, he was spotted at the Performance Center, but that doesn't always mean everything. Sometimes people have tryouts, and they don't ever appear at the Performance Center again. So I said, but still, Cody and Jade are huge gets. Little did I know, probably around the time I was saying it, because the Rumble match was still going on, that I was doing, and depending on the timing, the vignette might have been airing right around when I was like, oh, no, he's not there. It's not confirmed. So, well, they didn't actually show Brian Pillman Jr., but if you're a fan of wrestling, you understood the concept. We showed Cincinnati Bengals practice footage. We showed old Saturday Night footage. There was something else. But the message is pretty clear that it's Brian Pillman Jr. Getting ready to make his start in NXT. Excuse me, I almost had a burp right into the mic. On the Twitch stream, I wondered if WWE would actually sign him, because it seemed like, for what I was seeing around, he had a little bit of controversies with him that could be considered extra baggage, in a similar way that Matt Riddle had some extra baggage that ultimately led to his release. Wasn't able to talk about Matt Riddle's release last week because his release came a day or two after I did the recording for WWF Legends Challenge 64, which, by the way, is received a lot of fun response, and I want to issue an additional thanks to the creators behind the game. They do such wonderful work, and one of the folks from the team actually reached out after the episode to say their personal thanks. So, again, I can't recommend it enough. If you missed last week's episode, go check it out. Go and check it out. The links for the game are in anything that I post over on youtube.com/@BloodyBillVox for their content. But yeah, I really appreciated that they reached out and said some kind words. It was good stuff. It was good stuff. I lost where I was before that because I wanted to say those thank yous, so I probably lost a point back there. And unfortunately for me and my heavily concussed overtime brain, that point is probably lost to the ages. But getting back to excuse me, Jade Cargill and Brian Pillman Jr. I was talking about him and his potential problematics. That's what it was. And I was talking about Matt Riddle and his release. There we are. It came back. It was a longer disconnect than usual. So after the recording of last week's episode is when Matt Riddle's release got announced, and Brian Pillman Jr., for what I had seen, had a few stories that seemed to be a little problematic. Not quite as problematic as the obsessive ex and porn leaks and everything else. But I still wondered out loud. But, maybe he's been flying on the straight and narrow. We haven't really seen much of Brian Pillman Jr., and I don't want to sit here and cast judgment on a guy I don't know. I was just only speculating based on what was available in the public eye. But obviously WWE feels comfortable in taking an opportunity to present him, and he felt good to take it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Brian Pillman Jr. And then, of course, Jade Cargill being treated like a star right out of the gate. Her signing was announced on ESPN. She's already done a number of interviews. They've already shown her arriving at the PC. They're putting up pictures of her in the PC training. They're asking who fans want to see as her first opponents. Personally, I want to see her have a run through NXT. And even right now, with Becky Lynch being the NXT Women's Champion, you know, the timing of this could throw Tiffany Stratton off for a little bit, depending on what happens. No Mercy this weekend. But then again, Tiffany Stratton could very well walk away from No Mercy this weekend, or as this episode drops, the previous weekend, 2 days ago. But anyway, Tiffany Stratton may have retained or regained the NXT Women's Championship as this episode drops. As I record it, the event hasn't happened yet. That's why when Fantasy Warfare comes back in a couple weeks and I'm doing the commentary for those matches again, I think I'll be recording this podcast closer to the weekend, which will put me closer to the premiere date, which will make me stop doing these mental gymnastics about what's happened, what hasn't happened, and blah, blah, blah. But what I was speculating on is with Becky Lynch as the champion, maybe Jade comes into NXT, wins that breakout tournament, and then challenges Becky and beats her. I think a lot of people are expecting more of a quick impact, maybe even right to the main roster. Jade Cargill is one of the most fit women to ever be in wrestling. She's got the look, like top to bottom. She's got charisma. She's got sexuality. She's got the physique. She's got the promo. The only thing that lacks, in my opinion, is the overall in-ring game. And then again, maybe it was all on how she was presented in AEW. We'll find out as she starts working under the WWE machine, but they also know how to accentuate the positives and hide the negatives. But for what I've seen so far, I'd like to see her have a run through NXT, even if it's just a couple of months. 2-3 months in NXT, maybe she pops up in the Royal Rumble, and does some sort of damage there and converts to the main roster rather quickly. I'm not sure how you do it from there. But I think for her climb to be as meteoric as I think it has the potential to be, I think she's going to start by laying waste to NXT. Start at the bottom, work her way up to the top, and kind of similar to what she did in AEW, just lay waste to fools left and right. Until she's holding some championship gold. So I'm very excited for her to get that signing with WWE. Of course, a lot of people were, cracking jokes about how, they just announced 20 cuts and then they announced her signing. Some folks thought that they announced her signing immediately after the releases just so they could rub it in AEW's face. That just, to me, that shows the tribalism is very much alive and well, that the AEW fan base is just upset that one of theirs left and went over to WWE, which is bound to happen. There's going to be other AEW talents that go to WWE in the course of the history of that company. But my only hope is that I can hope that the tribalism amongst everybody just settles down, because it feels especially ugly lately. I don't understand why it's so tough to just let people like the wrestling they like, and why people decide they need to put so much energy into responding to the people that don't like the stuff that they like. Like, for example, that AEW botches account that got doxxed and taken down. Do you have to like that account existed? No. Was it worth trying to endanger somebody's family over it? Absolutely not. I don't know. I don't believe in giving energy to the stuff you don't like. There's a lot of stuff I see on Twitter and Facebook that I don't like, that I sit in my chair and I say, oh, the motherfucker. And then as soon as I get ready to start engaging in that energy, I say, nope, you don't want that. You don't want any of that. And the truth is I don't, because it's not worth it to me. to put that much time and energy into that kind of negativity. Sweet fucking Jesus, man. Life's too short to focus on negativity that much. And life sucks enough without adding to it. You know, for me, wrestling is an escape and a joy. So yeah, there's a lot I don't like. But there's a lot I do like. And I focus on that. I'm looking forward to Fastlane next weekend, even though there's or this coming weekend. Geez, the mental gymnastics. The first weekend of October. I'm looking forward to it, even though as of the start of this the recording of this episode, there's only a handicap match announced officially. I'm looking forward to it. There's gonna be some matches I don't want to see. There's gonna be some matches I do want to see, and I'm not gonna let my life be ruined and disrupted over the stuff I don't like. Life's just too short, and maybe, I say that a lot after almost dying a couple times in surgeries and things of that sort, so maybe I just got a different outlook, but I mean, I swear, folks, it's okay to like different wrestling and not like, different flavors within. It's like, it's like each promotion in a way is kind of like a Neapolitan ice cream. Do you like all three flavors they're giving you, or do you only like one flavor or two flavors, or do you like to mix your flavors? Maybe you don't go row by row. Maybe you go all across and you get a little bit. I don't know. The ice cream comparison is what people always go to, and I think it's the easiest one, and people just still don't respond to it. Like, would you physically and verbally attack somebody because they don't like chocolate ice cream, or because they don't like cookie dough? I mean, it sounds silly when you compare it to ice cream, but that's exactly what people do. But anyway, that's enough about current discussion, because, again, the mental gymnastics my head's got to go through. Like, as I record this episode, AEW TV is happening tonight, and even a pay-per-view is happening this Sunday. But as this episode drops, both of those things have already happened. I got to get a little bit closer to the weekend. And I think with Fantasy Warfare coming back and me having to edit those shows coming up, I think things will change quite a bit, mental gymnastics wise. I hope anyway, because I figure that's going to put me on like a Thursday or Friday recording instead of this Tuesday, Wednesday stuff. But anyway, let's jump into the topic of discussion for this week, TNA Impact. We're going to talk about the PlayStation 3 version specifically. That's where my experience is. But this game did come out on the Xbox 360, the PlayStation 2, and the Nintendo Wii. The Wii version came out a week after those first three. The game itself came out September 9th, 2008. It was released on the Wii on September 16th. It was published by Midway, developed by Midway. And the ratings that I looked up for this, we got a 6.4 out of 10 from IGN, a 7 out of 10 from GameSpot, a 2 out of 5 from Games Radar, which if you increase that fraction there, that basically makes it a 4 out of 10. And then Game Informer gave it a 6.5 out of 10. When TNA Impact first came out, my memory of that game is that I bought it, and it was so different from WWE games that I didn't give it much of a chance, or that I didn't even play it at all. I'm not sure. Like, I have no memory of when this game came out, whether or not I bought it. I can tell you there's no way I bought it on a pre-order. There's no way I bought it at full price. And that's because even to this day, TNA, or now known as Impact Wrestling, is very hard to consume. Their television distribution was garbage and is kind of garbage. Even when they were on Spike TV, it wasn't really promoted. It was on a bad night and not a great time slot. It didn't do great ratings. They always relegated themselves to sound stages, so it was tough to take them as more than a glorified independent wrestling promotion. So when this game came out, it was like, oh, cool, TNA is getting a game. But that was about it for my reaction at the time. Now, 20-something years later, in 2022 or 2023, earlier this year, I bought a copy of the game to really give it an actual shot. Because I collect physical copies of wrestling games. So I didn't have a copy of TNA iMPACT, so I needed to get a copy. If I'm going to get a copy, I'm going to go ahead and play the game. So before any of that had ever happened, if this podcast had become an idea, this game never would have been on the list. But thanks to the experience that I had playing it, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, I did a bunch of Twitch streams with the career mode. I have an experience now, and an experience that I can share with you. And it's mostly good, to be frankly honest with you. At the end of the day, I agree with these 6.4, 6.5, 7 ratings. I think I'd live more in the 6 to 6.5 area personally. But we'll talk about all of those things as the episode progresses. So today we've got a few different sources for our information, the majority of which is coming from the SmackDown Hotel, as always. When I sat down to record this episode, I hadn't powered up the game to record gameplay for the YouTube edition. So I will upfront, and then I will again credit Lion's Edge on YouTube for their video that reviewed the game, but also showcased all the options on the menu for the match modes. Credit for the overall roster. That goes parts about the reception when it was released, and then some notes about the sequel that should have been that are credit to prowrestling.fandom.com. So one of those wiki fandom sites. So those are all the credits this week. But starting from the top, let's tell you about the game. And I always struggle with words and things of that sort to describe a game, because I would just be like, yeah, it's a cool wrestling arcade game based on TNA, and there's some wrestlers in it, and there's some fun matches, and the career mode's all right. So we're gonna read what was on SmackDown Hotel's page, so that way you get a little bit better of a description. So it says for the header, it says, if you want an audience, start a fight. TNA iMPACT is the exclusive total nonstop action wrestling game based on the top-rated. Come on. Top-rated weekly television show TNA iMPACT. Choose the wrestling style, custom moveset, and clothing to construct the ultimate champion. TNA iMPACT drenches the player in moves and match types that allow amazing acrobatic and aerial feats, along with the bone-jarring crush of hard-hitting impacts. TNA iMPACT also features top wrestling talent such as Kurt Angle, Jeff Jarrett, Rhino, Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, Sting, Christian Cage, Abyss, and more to deliver all the excitement and action of the television show. I couldn't help but chuckle at the top-rated weekly TV show. That was just kind of amusing to me. But that was a pretty good descriptor of what to expect. If you're trying to keep it to a paragraph, that is a pretty good descriptor. I disagree about that it drenches us and stuff. A lot of moves and whatnot are locked and need to be unlocked through extensive playing of the game. I made a goofy character for the career mode, but I still felt the creative wrestler, considering it was on PS3, was still very limited. It felt PS2 limited in terms of options, in my opinion. But I still had a fun time making a weird character. I think I called it Bloody Bill, but it was if Bloody Bill was a redneck. Had a mullet and all that fun stuff. Randy Savage glasses, bandana, the whole 9 yards. So getting into the main features of the game, I'm going to skip this part about 25 of your favorite superstars because we'll go over the full roster in a few. So let's go with this one. Innovative Professional Wrestling. TNA's signature 6-sided ring brings unprecedented action and high-flying wrestling moves to TNA Impact players. With TNA Impact's incredible Ultimate X match, wrestlers climb cables high above the ring in a daring attempt to capture the belt. All right, let's stop there for a second and talk about the main features here. So the 6-sided ring does allow for a lot of fun, and the movements around the ring are very fast-paced, arcade-like, very much what you would expect from a Midway game. If you played Midway games in the 90s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. A number of wonderful games out there. Of course, I'm blanking on anything Midway. I think the only thing I can think of right now is NHL 2-on-2 Open Ice. Everything's very fast-paced, high impact, and the same can be said for TNA Impact. So I agree with that. But since we're already talking about the Ultimate X match, I guess we can talk about how that really plays out. My experience in playing it out is it is literally a match that you wrestle on the cables. The AI, at least in the career mode, I will confess that as of the recording of this episode, and it will probably change for gameplay, I haven't played an X Division match or an Ultimate X match outside of career mode. But when it was in career mode, it was 3 or 4 matches in a row of basically me and the computer scaling the cables, kicking each other down, and trying to make the little thing in the middle meet so you could grab the X. So I don't know what the deal was there, why the AI is just so intent on climbing. Like the Ultimate X matches, yeah, they were about climbing the cables, but it would seem like they would want to like keep you down, that sort of stuff. I don't know. Feels like that match could have been a lot better executed in the game. But yeah, basically, yeah, when it says wrestlers climb cables high above the ring in a daring attempt to capture the belt, that's literally what the match turns into. So yeah. Become a TNA Impact legend. Build a lifetime of fame through TNA Impact's innovative story mode. Create your very own TNA Impact wrestler with customized costume, ring entrance, movesets, music, and more to unfold the backstory of a TNA Impact wrestler. Or to unfold the backstory of a champion TNA Impact wrestler. The story mode in TNA Impact was bizarre as all hell, and I loved it. The only thing I don't love about it is the main character's name was Suicide. It wasn't great in 2008, and it's even worse now with more of a spotlight being shined on mental health struggles and suicide rates and things of that sort. In fact, when I was streaming the game, I would frequently avoid saying the character's name. Or I would say the guy with the unfortunate name, because I never liked, I talked about ideation in the last episode. I never liked a character that seemingly encouraged people to unalive themselves. And part of this character's pose was putting a gun to its head, finger gun, but still putting a gun to its head and, doing that whole deal. So that's my biggest gripe with the story mode. We could have done any other character. We could have done anything else instead of a character named Suicide. And later they renamed it Manic, which was better. As somebody who has experienced manic episodes, I still wasn't overly impressed with that rename, but that's okay. At the end of the day, they did what they did, and there's a lot of questionable things in wrestling's past that we look back on and we might have liked at the time. They just don't age well. In the case of Suicide, it didn't look good then, and it didn't age well at all, in my opinion. But the story mode itself is rather fun, even though you are playing that Suicide character. But basically, you were rising the ranks of TNA, you crossed Jeff Jarrett, you got beaten, you got taken out, and you have no memory. You got left in some dingy backwoods hospital in Mexico, and you wake up with no memory of anything that's going on, but you kind of know that you belong in the ring, and so that's where your creative character comes in. That's where my redneck Bloody Bill came in. And so you start traveling around the world, looking to make an impact, quote unquote. Remix. Hopefully I found a really fun little record scratch or remixing noise there. But when I sat down to start recording this episode, I was under the assumption that my an hour. Turns out it must have only been 30 minutes because I'm not sure as of right now, because I was able to sit back down and start recording pretty fast. But there may have been a knock at the end of the first part of this podcast, so I had to stop, and we're starting again. So when we left off, I was addressing the story mode. And to summarize, basically, you ran afoul of Jeff Jarrett. They beat the crap out of you. You ended up in a dingy Mexican motel or a hotel. Dingy Mexican hospital. No memory of who you are. That's where my redneck Bloody Bill character comes into play. You start going through the various venues of the world looking to make your impact. Going back to TNA, I think I laughed at the same joke in the first half, too. I'm so lame sometimes. Excuse me. And then eventually you get into TNA, and they kind of start figuring out who you are, and Jeff Jarrett starts sending everybody after you. You have feuds along the way over the tag team titles and various matches of that sort. So I'm going to jump to the arenas because those are the ones that you play through the most. When you're in the story mode, I think you start in Mexico, and then you go through England, you go through Japan. The Freedom Center, I feel like, is supposed to be in Philadelphia. It very much has a Philadelphia feel to it. It has a very Philadelphia feel to it. There's an armory, and then, of course, the Impact Zone in Orlando. So it's not very heavy in venues, and they don't even have the Impact Zone decked out different ways for the pay-per-views. Like there's not a Bound for Glory or Destination X or Lethal Lockdown or whatever their pay-per-views were called. I honestly cannot remember who the opponents or what their pay-per-views were, because again, like I said earlier, their distribution was just absolute garbage. So let's see. I'm looking up the fuller version of the story mode right now. So when you first kind of start, do things, you modify the look. You start off in Mexico. You do a gauntlet match. Then you head to the armory and you face one of the super clowns, Benny. Then you do a foot in the door match against James Storm, which is how you start getting your TNA opportunities. You start having a bunch of interactions with TNA talents like AJ Styles and Tom Coe, and if you win the match involving Styles and Tom Coe, you get Tom Coe as an unlockable. And I remember the match with Styles and Tom Coe was absolutely bonkers, and took me so many tries to finally get it right. And when I finally got it right, it was like such a thrill. Eventually, you become a protege of Kevin Nash. And and you sit through some speeches with him. You end up with an interaction with Jay Lethal. But all of this eventually comes down to Jeff Jarrett is starting to figure you out. So there starts to be some mystery attacks, and LAX is on the job, and Kevin Nash, you get teamed up with Eric Young along the way, but you're annoyed by him, but then you start to feel for him, and they take out Eric Young. The story has a lot of twists and stuff. The worst part about the story is the X Division portion, because like I said before, that X Division match is literally like a series of freaking cables, cable climbing, and that's it. It's literally it. It's just cable climbing. But the story mode itself is really just you working your way through Impact, and eventually you end up not only in Jarrett's crosshairs, but then you end up having to do some of Jarrett's biddings. But it's along the way of doing Jarrett's biddings, and you start, having matches against bigger names, and even Kevin Nash kind of turns against you at one point, but not really. There's a whole backstory to that. I know the game is like 15 years old, but I don't want to give away too many spoilers here in case somebody hasn't played it and they want to play it based on the video they're watching on YouTube. But eventually, you get to the point where you start remembering who you used to be as Suicide, and you let Jeff Jarrett know that you remember everything about the past. You know how he's been manipulating, and you end up with Jeff Jarrett as the final boss. And let me just tell you, Jeff Jarrett as the final boss is everything as a final boss. Like it is absolutely bonkers how rough he is to beat. Basically, you gotta hit and move, avoid repeat attacks, avoid grapples. Like you gotta beat him down quite a bit for quite a while before you can even stand a chance of beating Jeff Jarrett. He was a real tough one. The Styles and Tomko match was really tough. I think the Booker T match was pretty tough. Stinger Nash, I feel like, gave me a challenge, but Jeff Jarrett the Jeff Jarrett match was such a challenge when I was playing it that it got its own stream. Because I had failed so many times the day before. Excuse me. Failed so many times the day before that I was like, okay, we're the final showdown. Like I had graphics and everything. But the story mode is definitely the meat of the game, in my opinion, because let's go back to the modes. It's not real deep in terms of modes. Well, actually, let me go back to the last part of the description, because I went pretty far there with the story mode. I didn't get to experience this, and obviously the servers are down at this point 15 years later, but apparently it had an online. It says TNA Impact's online play allows you to create new tournaments, customize match rules, and invite TNA Impact playing friends or foes to compete head-to-head. TNA Impact's online game modes include Tag Team, Ultimate X, King of the Mountain, Fatal 4-Way, and more. Interesting that King of the Mountain was involved in the online environment, but it wasn't something you could play offline. I don't know what it was, and I didn't see anything about it really in any of my research. It's kind of the first mention I've seen of it there otherwise. But interesting that I wonder if it's kind of like how AEW does Stadium Stampede as an online mode only. But, since that was a mode, that transitions us into the other modes, which, again, this comes from Lion's Edge on YouTube, because they put up a fun video, and I didn't feel like firing up my PS3, so they get credit for this. We have Exhibition, and then within Exhibition mode, we have standard one-on-one, we got Tag Team, we got a free-for-all, we got Ultimate X, we got Ultimate X free-for-all, Submission, and Falls Count Anywhere. So that's really it. No Steel Cage, nothing like that. Not even a standard ladder match. So the game modes are definitely lacking, and then for the rest of the modes, we've got Story, Online, and Create a Wrestler. The story is really where it's at in this game. If you want to have some wonky fun, for 10 or 15 bucks. The story is definitely worth a play. I'll get to my final review in a few here. But since I'm going way out of order here, let's talk about the roster that was in this game. Since the modes were pretty weak, we look at the roster, and it's not all that much more heavy. For actual TNA names, we've got Abyss, AJ Styles, Alex Shelley, Booker T, Brother Devon, Brother Ray, Christian Cage, Christopher Daniels, Chris Sabin, Eric Young, Hernandez, Homicide, James Storm, Jeff Jarrett, Jay Lethal, Kevin Nash, Kurt Angle, Petey Williams, Rhino, Robert Roode, Samoa Joe, Scott Steiner, Senshi, also known as Low Key, Shark Boy, Sanjay Dutt, Sting, and Tomko. Now, that's a small roster compared to, say, a WWE game, but pretty big name value there for recognizable names from both TNA and previous WWE and WCW pasts. So I give the roster a pretty good score. Our commentators were Mike Today and Don West, and then some alternate characters that came to us via the story mode and other unlockables. We had Afro Thunder, Benny the Clown, Bruiser Bencia, Dark Hato, Barbarino, Corporal something or other, Demonic DJ, Devil Child, Furious Fire, Giant Guppy, Hannah Layla, Lenny the Clown, Sergeant Harden, Suplex Salenza, Shogun Yanai, and Thunder Lang are the other kind of off-brand, although, of course, you may recognize Afro Thunder as a name. So the roster itself and the game modes themselves, it's okay. It would have been a good start for the TNA brand if they were really getting into video gaming. But as we would find out in 2009, courtesy of the Pro Wrestling Fandom page, it says Midway Games originally announced a sequel to the game. In July 2009, Time Warner purchased the majority of Midway. The TNA license was not included in the purchase. In a September 2009 interview, TNA president Dixie Carter announced that TNA was looking for a new video game partner. On November 11, 2009, South Peak Games confirmed it acquired Midway Games' TNA video game license in its quarterly report. The first game published by the company was TNA Impact Cross the Line for the PSP and Nintendo DS. It was released on June 25th, 2010. So there was going to be a sequel to this game, and considering the reception, which again from the Pro Wrestling Fandom site, it says, IGN gave varied reviews for all platforms, 6.7 on the Xbox, 6.4 on the PS3, and 5.3 on the PS2. IGN said the graphics were great, though the lack of creator wrestler, championships, moves, and brain-dead tag team AI were not favorable, and that's why that Tomko Styles match was so tough. GameSpot was more favorable, saying that the first TNA video game was off to a good start, and I agree with that, praising the sound effects but panned the voice acting. I agree with both of those. A lot of the reads in the story mode are just, you can tell these guys are reading lines. That's it. Tech Gaming gave TNA a B grade, stating that they liked the zippy frame rate and accessible controls, but bemoaned the similarity of each wrestler's move list. That is definitely an issue in the game that I will agree with as well. Lots of repetitive moves. You're doing a lot of the same stuff over and over and over again. The tag team AI is ridiculous. I think the AI in general is a bit tough to manage, even when you're on easy. The reversal system drove me nuts. If you happen to tune into any of my Twitch streams or have watched any of the iMPACT videos that are here on this channel, on YouTube, if you're watching here, I complained a lot about those reversals. I complained absolutely a lot. But getting back to the sequel and kind of combining about how GameSpot said it was a good start, I would have loved to have seen a TNA Impact 2, and I wonder why South Peak Games never did anything more than this TNA Impact Cross the Line PSP and DS game. I sure hope that they didn't judge the performance of those two as whether or not they should try on the bigger platforms, because I knew a lot of people with PS3s, PS2s, and Xboxes. I didn't know many people that were actively doing wrestling games on PSPs and DSs. So that's a weird choice for a release. But still to this day, there's never been another TNA game on the major platforms. Not even on the PC, like a Steam game. Nothing. Even Chikara at one point had a game that was branded for them. Of course, in speaking out, the branding got removed, and now it's just Action Arcade Wrestling, a real fun game you can pick up on Steam and various other console platforms like the PS and the Xbox. But Impact has never re-entered the console or PC gaming platform or arena. And I've always wondered why, because their TV distribution sucks. They're very tough to consume, but they seem to have a decent presence on social media. They've got a subscription service that you can subscribe to every month. And their roster is typically pretty good. Like, they typically have a lot of good names on their roster. So I wonder why TNA Impact never got that sequel with somebody else. Why somebody else didn't pick up that license. And maybe it's because of how small they stay and how almost in a bubble they remain. But even AEW churned out a video game in the first few years of their existence. So it's weird to me that Impact isn't able to do that. Hell, even AAA has got a game out on the market that we'll eventually cover here on the show, Heroes Del Ring. So, I mean, if an Impact Wrestling game were to come out at some point in the future, depending on the developer, I think I would give it a shot. And I would certainly encourage anybody else to give the original a shot. So on that note, let's go ahead and read my final review, so we can go ahead and get on out of here for this week's episode that was recorded in 2 parts. That was fun. I was not expecting that knock at the door, but they're gone now. So it's all good. They're gone now. It's all good in the hood. Anyway, my final review of this game, like I said, I write them in advance, so I'm not really stumbling and bumbling around, but I'm sure I'll stumble and bumble through this a little bit. There were many parts of this game that I really enjoyed when I played the story mode. When the game came out originally in 2008, I either didn't buy it or I didn't have it for long because it simply didn't appeal to me because I wasn't insanely familiar with TNA or their history, despite the 6 years of existence and major names from WWE and WCW that had joined the company from the start, such as Sting, Kurt Angle, Booker T, Kevin Nash, and others. The problem for me with TNA was their distribution. First it was weekly pay-per-views, then it was afternoons on Fox Sports Net, and then it was finally on Spike TV, but it was horribly promoted and in a time slot that wasn't overly appealing. Amazingly, the company is still around today as Impact Wrestling. I thought Midway did a really good job with this. The graphics were solid, the gameplay was very arcade-like, and overall it was fun, but what takes it down some notches for me was the control system and the reversals. For me, while playing the story mode, too many of the controls almost bordered on being the same for something else, so when I would try to do one thing, it would result in another. I think one of my most frequent was I'd be trying to roll out of the way and it wouldn't let me do it, or I'd be trying to get up and it would think I was doing something else. So the response time seemed to be off in a lot of spots. I loved and hated the reversals. Because I hate the 2-button system. I always have. It's hell. But the AI seemed to be always stronger at the reversals than I was. However, in the same token, if you were able to have that lightning fast speed, there were times where you could have endless reversals and it would lead to some fun sequences. In the end, the game is worth the play for the story mode alone. I can't say too much for replay value on the other modes, but if you were looking for a few hours, I think it was about 7 or 8, to spend playing a wrestling story mode that is originally based and written specifically for a game, this story mode is a fun and quirky story mode to play. The Suicide name remains an unfortunate choice even to this day, but despite that, the story mode is definitely why I would recommend this game. You can typically find yourself a copy of it for about $10 to $15, depending on whether you get a complete copy, disc only, case and disc, whatever your combination is. But the maximum you can really expect to spend for this is $15 if you find it somewhere. The review ends on this line: will be good for a handful of hours of fun and frustration. My final score would be a 6 out of 10. You know, TNA Impact, when it first came out, it missed me completely because I was not really a TNA fan. In fact, one of the only times I tried to order a pay-per-view was when Jushin Thunder Liger was appearing, and Comcast dropped the feed completely. Or TNA dropped their feed completely, and we all missed the match. They posted it for free later, but the entire reason I ordered their pay-per-view was for that. I even went to a TNA pay-per-view in Boston a few years back, and it was a fun, about 10 years back, actually. Fun experience, but, you know, overall, it still had that small-time feel. But TNA's just never really been fully on the radar for me. So, you know, in some of these other episodes, I have like childhood memories or even, you know, teenage and early 20s memories. I got nothing with this. The memories that I have with this game are buying it to add it to my collection, finally discovering what is good about it and what is bad about it, and kind of looking back in retrospect and saying, like, this game did a lot of good for what it was trying to do at the time. It was a good start for a TNA game series, and it's a damn shame that it never got a sequel and never got to go further, because I think a TNA video game, especially given their roster, could have been a really good revenue stream for TNA. But who knows what the future may hold? Maybe someday they'll find a developer that wants to make a TNA video game. I mean, you know, New Japan got wrapped up in Fire Pro. AAA had their game years back. They've never had another one since, but they still got one. And of course, WWE, the major powerhouse, putting out their annual 2K series. But if TNA were to ever drop another video game, especially with the current roster, or Impact Wrestling, especially with their current roster and the roster they tend to keep, I'd definitely give it a shot. And like I said, you should definitely give TNA Impact a shot, whether it's on the PS3, the PS2, the Xbox. I'd probably avoid it on the Wii. None of these wrestling games ever port well to the Wii, but I don't know. Maybe it ported just fine. But on that note, my friends, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up for this week's episode of Dropkicks and Joysticks. I'd like to thank you for tuning in yet again. This was episode 13. I believe I can say officially that it's the record setter. I did a podcast once upon a time called The Wrestling War Room, and I don't think it lasted more than 11 or 12 at max. I think it capped out at 10. But either way, if it was 11 or 12, this is 13, so that's the record setter. So good times, and we're going to keep doing them. Next week will be episode 14, and I'm going to go ahead and cover backyard wrestling on the PS2. There was a period of time where backyard wrestling was like all the rage. I was a backyard wrestler. My friends were the backyard wrestlers. There was backyard wrestling tapes. ICP was getting involved with backyard wrestling. You could even find videos of a time Greg the Hammer Valentine, drunk on something, took a backyard wrestling booking. The point being is there was a point in time where backyard wrestling was almost a culture phenomenon within the wrestling genre. And it was such a big deal that they made not only one, but 2 video games on it. And next week, we're going to go ahead and talk about the first one. So until that time, if you'd like to keep up with me on social media and any of my live streaming and other content creations, you can do so at Bloody Bill Vox, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, and other places. As I always like to say, if you're on a platform and you want to know if I'm there, just search at Bloody Bill Vox. And if you see me, I'm there. And if you don't, I'm probably not going to be there anytime soon. But until next week, have a great week out there, my friends. Stay safe, stay happy, have fun, and I'll see you right back here next Monday for another episode of Dropkicks and Joysticks. Hey, I didn't sing this time. That's very weird. I must be feeling sick. Oh, my mic is still on.